Okay, so what I'm going to talk to you about now is how your fake morality actually keeps narcissistic abuse in play and holds the system that is the narcissistically abusive relationship between two people together, that stops the person from leaving. So we're talking about in a context of the abuse being predominantly emotional and psychological abuse, gaslighting, reframing, double bind usage, putting people inside of catch-22s, that kind of thing. When you're talking about physical abuse and actual domestic violence, where things have actually reached the point where domination is being enforced through actually hitting a person, then it becomes visible, then it becomes explicit, then it becomes something the victim has to work a lot harder to deny. It's not impossible to deny it, but you have to work harder to deny it. How did you end up with your face the way it is? The process by which the victim would need to go through to say, no, it's okay. This is the kind, I made him do it, or I made her do it, because domestic violence can be something that women leverage against men as well. I was talking to somebody just recently about that. He got cut on his head. He needed stitches in his head because his girlfriend, she fractionated into more and more violence over a series of emotionally dysregulated incidents, and eventually chucked something at him and cut his head open. And he kind of justified it a little bit afterwards. He was like, she gets like this when she drinks, and I kind of argue with her. I kind of provoked her, and it's like, well, you're kind of justifying abusive behaviour. But it's explicit when it's physical. So we're talking here about emotional, predominantly about emotional abuse, the emotional abuse of a cluster B, narcissistic abuse, the kind of thing somebody with full-blown narcissistic personality disorder would use against a target, against the victim. So let's talk about how your morality holds the system and the relationship in place, and then we'll talk about how that morality is actually fake. In order for, the way I'm thinking about it recently, is that in order for the system to hold together, it kind of has to, if you imagine a structure, two parts of a structure are leaning together in such a way that it holds firm, that it holds still, instead of just collapsing and just falling apart. I'll show you how it can fall apart later on. In order for this structure to work, imagine this is actually two people, two psychologies, two personalities, two minds that are coming together. In order for that to work and to hold, this one is actually leaning against this one. And the only reason why this one is going to let this one do it is because it has this thing called a morality, that it thinks is a morality. So this one actually has a moral structure that permits the structures to hold together like this and to hold. If it doesn't, if this one over here says, no, I have no morality, I don't care, I'm not going to seek to do good, seek to do the right thing, quotation marks, then you get collapse. The whole thing just doesn't work. This one tries to lean on this one, and this one goes, no, we're not doing that. The fakeness of that morality is it's not actually true morality. So I'll often hear, and I probably said myself as a victim of narcissistic abuse myself, that I'm taking the higher road. I'm being the bigger person. I'm showing compassion. I'm showing empathy where this person perhaps never experienced empathy before. And then you make up all the justifications. She was abandoned in childhood by her father and it was incredibly traumatic, and then the mother imposed the needs of her intimate relationships that should have gone to the father onto her, and so on and so forth. This is the justifications I used, and it led to me saying, well, it's a moral decision for me to stay in this abusive relationship because I'm a psychologist, I like to help people, because I simply have the moral responsibility to do that because I can see it and it's clear to me. So I actually held up the structure of that abusive relationship with this morality, but it's fake. It's an addiction. It's not true morality. It's actually just a post hoc justification for me playing out something that I've been trained to do since childhood. And this is true of every victim of narcissistic abuse. It's repetition compulsion. We are simply and only playing out a neurotic, sweaty, hysterical, unhappy, twitchy, Gollum-like, addictive, sort of emotional adult role play game between ourselves and our partner that was originally brainwashed into us and forced into us from either parental abuse or caregiver abuse in childhood, or total neglect, total and absolute neglect. So the fake morality of the people pleaser or the codependent is what holds that structure in place. If you take that fake morality out, it doesn't work anymore. Your problems cease to be my problems. The fact that you can't make something work in your life is just a fact, like the sky is blue and water is wet. It's not my problem, it's not my responsibility. Then when the abusive personality comes to me and says, oh, I can't do this, I need money but I don't have money, I don't leap forward in this addicted, sweaty frenzy going, please take some of mine, or please take some of my energy, please take some of my time, please take some of my help, because that fake morality is not there. So there you go. I actually managed to do a short video. The two things to take away from that is that you need a moral structure in order for the narcissistically abusive relationship to take place. They require you to have a sense of doing the right thing, and that actually that moral structure is a fake morality. It is the faux morality of somebody who's just trained into victimhood and codependence. It's not real. They're relying on your desire to do good. They're relying on your desire to people please. They're relying on your desire to be empathic, to be compassionate, spiritual, whatever bullshit spin you want to put on it, whatever bullshit, new age, hippy dippy or psychobabble spin you want to put on it. You're a slave, you're an addict, and you feel most comfortable and most warm and cozy and fuzzy when there's a nice thick jackboot resting on your face, and that's not a cool place to be. It's not moral, it's not spiritually advanced to do that, it doesn't make you a more evolved human being to do that. It makes you a victim and an addict, and it has to stop. So the first boundary that you have to set, and the first person you need to say no to, is yourself. And the first thing that you need to say no to is that sick, perverted, addicted instinct inside of you that leaps forward to try and help somebody when perhaps, you can't even really help yourself. You should be looking to help yourself first. So there you go, non-serviam. Thanks very much for your time and your attention, and I will post another video tomorrow. Thank you. Look, Max. Max, look. Yes, very good. So Max had some feedback for me that he was listening attentively to everything I said, and using his amazing brain of psychology and philosophy, he wanted to point out that something I missed was that these things don't always play out in intimate relationships. I don't want to create an assumption that it's something that has to be in an intimate relationship. Sometimes it could just be with somebody you don't know, somebody you're having an interaction with in a professional context, or somebody you just meet in the street. And that porous ego boundaries is a two-way thing. That means that you don't have the boundary to stop other people from encroaching into your space, nor do you have the ability to stop yourself encroaching into their space. So sometimes this need to overhelp other people based on this fake morality, this structure that's created by the fake morality, is actually just because you have weak boundaries. If you want to know more about that, you should check out the free videos on YouTube by Pia Melody, P-I-A Melody with an extra L in it. She's got a ton of free videos on YouTube, they're really good, talking about codependence. And she identifies that one of the things that codependents really struggle to do is to actually not just have that biological cell wall prevent things from coming inside of the cell, but to prevent leakage outward. And this can sometimes be us as codependents leaking out onto other people and doing things they don't need or want us to do. That addictive, sweaty instinct to soothe the other person because you think that they're suffering because you said no to them. Like, they say something very simple like, will you give me a lift at 3? And you go, no, I can't do that because I'm having my nails done, which I do every day. Then your instinct after that, instead of just going, oh fine, I can't help them, will be to then go one step further and then explain it, and then go, no, but I will give you 5 more lifts on another date and do your nails whilst I'm giving you a lift and plait your hair, because of that very deep feeling of guilt that's inside of us all the time that we're constantly trying to placate and negotiate with. It's a voracious and greedy demon that can't be fulfilled. You can't placate that feeling of guilt by doing things for other people. The only option you have is to say no, non serviam. This is an addiction. These guilt feelings, they're not mine. They were shoved into me by a shaming, a guilt-inducing, abusive environment from childhood. And, you know, I have to overcome them. This is where a lot of the problem comes from, is that we feel guilty all the time, and it's very easy to push our guilt buttons. So, yeah, there was that. The other thing that I should have mentioned that Max pointed out to me is that neurotypical people, meaning people who don't suffer from porous ego boundaries, codependency issues, and people pleaser syndrome, don't suffer with any of this. Don't think because you have CPTSD and you're walking around in the world and seeing people interact that they're experiencing what you're experiencing. They're not. Life is a lot easier for people who don't have these issues because they can say no and feel nothing about it and not give it a second thought. So in this scenario where actually a genuinely abusive person comes along, because not every interaction is about, oh, he's a narcissist, she's a narcissist, this guy's a narcissist. It's not always about that. It could just be purely about you. It could just be purely about me, my issues, your issues, the codependency thing. And actually the other person isn't really doing anything at all. It's just us and our sort of sickness playing out. And the question will then be, how do I know which is which? Well, this is the work. You know, this is the work that we have to do, figuring out, is this me? Am I in an emotional flashback? Am I in some CPTSD emotional flashback that has triggered my guilt, and now I'm trying to suppress and wrestle that guilt down where I must be wrong and I owe the other person more than they owe me because I'm always a piece of shit and my needs have to be totally denied and I have to take on the needs of the other person because that's what I was trained to do as a little zombie slave by a zombie witch doctor in childhood? Or is this genuinely about something else where the other person is being abusive? So let's say the other person is, which they're not always, sometimes it's just you, it's just me, it's just our issues. If they are being abusive, if it is reaction-seeking communication, manipulation, gaslighting, reframing, that kind of thing, when they come in, if this part of the structure, i.e. the other person, and this is the cluster B, the narcissist, the zombie witch doctor, whatever it happens to be, and they come in and this person doesn't have this fake morality issue going on and they try and lean on them, this person will just walk away. They'll just shrug it off. And there won't be some triumphant moment of self-championing where they're like, haha, I denied you and I stood up for myself. 9 times out of 10 they'll just shrug and walk away, and they'll be bewildered by the interaction. They'll have a weird feeling like this person is just encroaching on their boundaries and being somewhat socially inappropriate, but they won't see them as the devil. They won't see them as some apex predator, ultimate manipulator, super powerful dark being like we do, because the rest of the world they're not. They're only powerful, I have to say this, to those of us who are weak, to those of us who've already had the slave training from childhood who have weak ego boundaries. To us, they're very powerful. To neurotypicals who didn't suffer that abuse, they're not powerful, they're just weird. They're odd. They're shrugged off. They're just like, ugh, I don't know why you just said that to me in the way you did, but it's not a thing for me because they're not spinning out into emotional flashbacks all the time. I'm just going to end this video that could have been short that now isn't with one final thought. This is a new idea for me and I'm finding it useful. The other new-ish idea for me from the last 3 months or so is that it all comes back to emotional flashbacks. If you want to move forward with your life, if you want to never get into a narcissistically abusive relationship again or handle a narcissistically abusive relationship that you just can't escape because people are like, oh, no contact, no contact, no contact's the ultimate thing. Guess what, fuckers? It ain't an option for some people. They're stuck. They got kids with the ex, and that's a narcissist, and they can't escape them. So no contact is not always an option. So you've got to handle contact with narcissist personality types sometimes. So you please don't just mindlessly tout and chant no contact all the time, because you're really frustrating some of the victims of narcissistic abuse who can't get out of it, and you're compelling their feelings of what would Pete Walker call it, the abandonment melange, the depression, the sense of helplessness. So be careful when you're advocating just blindly, repetitively, like in a militant way, no contact, no contact. It's not an option for many people. So be careful saying that, because you might actually set them off in a direction that's not going to be helpful to them. It's all about managing emotional flashbacks. Whatever your question is, whatever thing you're just about to question me and that you're going to write in the comments here, it's going to come down to you being able to manage and overcome those emotional flashbacks. If you can do that, say you're in a narcissistic relationship, it can only, this thing of the fake morality is a manifestation of an emotional flashback of guilt, a manifestation of emotional flashback of self-abandonment. If you're in a narcissistic relationship and you feel stuck there, and you feel that guilt, that you know it's slightly your fault, that you're stuck there all the time, that's an emotional flashback issue. If you can overcome the emotional flashback, that won't work anymore. I'm afraid it's not overnight. It's not an instant thing. It's months, really months if you're very dedicated and disciplined. And probably realistically, it's going to take a year of solid training before you see really good results from that. But do it. That's what I did, and that's what worked for me. If you can shrink the inner critic, reduce the emotional flashbacks, you will not get caught in narcissistic relationships again in the future. You'll walk away from the current narcissistic relationships you're dealing with now, or be able to handle them much more effectively, and you will cease to crave abusive relationships in the future. The idea, this was mentioned recently to me, that you want to be in high drama relationships with reaction seeking people who are abusive because that's exciting to you, that's an emotional flashback issue. I released a video not that long ago. There was a lady who was talking about being stuck in a thing. She was stuck in an emotionally abusive relationship with a military veteran. She's American, she's a good American girl, she has good American values, and she believes that the right thing to do is to stand by this American soldier who's done his duty to his country and through no fault of his own is now suffering with PTSD. That's the kind of fake morality that locks us into relationships. Is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. It's not her job to fix him. That's a boundaryless response to the scenario. So if that lady or anybody else who's suffering from the same thing, if you can understand the emotional flashbacks and you can understand the guilt that these emotional flashbacks are inducing, you can reduce it and reduce the inner critic, you won't crave, you won't be at the mercy of these relationships anymore. You will be able to go no contact where previously you couldn't. If you cannot go no contact, you'll be able to manage it so much better, because that personality right now, if you're an emotional flashbacker, they can press any button they like at any moment with a look, with a smile, with a smirk, with a text. It's too easy to spin you out for an entire day, or for some people it's days on end in an emotional flashback. You reduce all that, they lose that power. What are they going to terrorize you with after that when you take their weapons away? And you will no longer crave dramatic, sorry, I never finished what I was saying before, which is typical of me. The lady who was dating the war veteran, who felt it was her duty to stay with him because he had PTSD even though he was being abusive, she actually, I titled the video because I was answering her question, I'm craving the spike. I'm craving the spike. She was craving the adrenaline spike. This is trauma bonding. This is based in the idea that love is pain, that love is this dramatic, abusive, abandoning, pulling away and tearing my guts out kind of thing that we can all get stuck on and think that that's becomes exciting, that's what's sexy, that's what's energetic and charismatic, and a more stable sort of scenario isn't that, and it's not as juicy, it's not as exciting, and then we feel guilty and masochistically weird about it and go, oh, it's just me, I just have weird tastes. It's not that. These are emotional flashbacks. It's an emotional flashback issue. You're addicted then to being in an emotional flashback. You're addicted to the cycle of emotional flashbacking. You're addicted to the pain that emotional abuse can cause. If you shrink the inner critic and you deal with the emotional flashbacks, all of that will go away. Okay, that's it. It wasn't a short video in the end. Never mind. Thank you very much for your time and your attention, and I'll speak to you again soon.